What if I told you that you could turn $100 into $200 in just 90 days? Guaranteed. In 1920, a man arrived in Boston with $2.50 in his pocket. 90 days later, he was collecting millions of dollars a day, promising to double your cash in just 3 months. He wasn't trading stocks, bonds, or real estate. He was running the most famous financial scam in human history. This is the story of Charles Ponzi. Boston, 1919. A charismatic, charming Italian immigrant named Charles Ponzi walks down School Street. He wears a tailored suit, a straw boater hat, and carries a gold-headed cane. To anyone watching, he looks like the embodiment of the American dream. Only a few years earlier, Ponzi had stepped off a ship at Boston Harbor with exactly $2.50 in his pocket. He had gambled away the rest of his savings during the voyage. He worked as a dishwasher, a waiter, and even served prison time in Canada and Atlanta for forgery and smuggling. He was broke, ambitious, and desperate to become rich. He didn't want to work decades for a modest wage. He wanted a shortcut. In the summer of 1919, a routine piece of junk mail landed on his desk, containing a tiny paper voucher that would spark the most famous financial fraud in human history. The voucher was an International Reply Coupon, IRC. It was a simple tool used in global mail. A person in Spain could buy an IRC at their local post office and send it in a letter to the US. The American recipient could take that voucher to a US post office and exchange it for American postage stamps. Ponzi noticed a massive financial glitch caused by World War I. European currencies had collapsed due to war inflation, but IRC exchange rates were fixed by international treaties. Ponzi calculated that he could buy IRCs for pennies in weak European currencies, ship them to America, and redeem them for US stamps worth significantly more. In theory, it was pure arbitrage, buying cheap in one market and selling high in another. Ponzi claimed he could double an investor's money by taking advantage of this global postal loophole. The math sounded brilliant, technical, and completely legitimate to the everyday person. In December 1919, Ponzi opened a tiny office in Boston under the name Securities Exchange Company. He made a promise that sent shockwaves through the city. Hand over your cash, and I will pay you a 50% return in 45 days, or 100% in 90 days. To put that in perspective, legitimate banks at the time offered a modest 3% annual interest. Ponzi was promising to give investors 50 times what a bank paid, in a fraction of the time. Initial investors were skeptical, but a few brave souls handed over small sums: $10, $50, $100. Exactly 45 days later, Ponzi paid them back in crisp, green US banknotes, exactly as promised. Word spread like wildfire through the Italian-American neighborhood of the North End. People weren't just interested, they were desperate to get in. By the spring of 1920, total hysteria took over Boston. Thousands of people lined up outside Ponzi's office on School Street, spilling out into the streets. Factory workers, widows, police officers, and wealthy merchants jostled each other to hand Ponzi their life savings. Ponzi's clerks couldn't count the money fast enough. They stuffed greenbacks into wooden desks, wastebaskets, and hat boxes. When the desks overflowed, they piled cash in the corners of the room. On a single day, Ponzi was collecting over $250,000, the equivalent of millions of dollars today. He bought a 12-room mansion, drove a custom locomobile, wore diamond cufflinks, and bought a fleet of luxury cars. He was hailed as a financial genius who was giving everyday working people a chance to beat Wall Street. Here was the terrifying secret that Charles Ponzi kept hidden from the world. He was not actually trading International Reply Coupons. The logistics were impossible. To legitimize the amount of money he was taking in, Ponzi would have needed to buy and ship over 160 million individual paper coupons across the Atlantic. At the time, only about 27,000 coupons actually existed in the entire world. There was no arbitrage. There was no postal trade. Ponzi was running a classic robbing Peter to pay Paul scheme. He was taking the cash brought in by new investors and using it to pay off the interest owed to older investors. As long as a steady stream of new people kept handing over their savings, the illusion remained completely invisible. By July 1920, Ponzi had collected over $15 million from more than 20,000 people, but his massive overnight wealth attracted the scrutiny of the financial establishment and investigative journalists. The Boston Post began investigating Ponzi's claims. They hired a respected financial analyst, Clarence Barron, the man behind Barron's Financial Magazine, to audit the operation. Barron published a devastating teardown on the front page. Barron pointed out the simple physical reality. To generate the returns Ponzi claimed, hundreds of ships would need to be loaded purely with stamps. Furthermore, Ponzi wasn't investing his own money in his own scheme. He kept his personal cash in a standard local savings bank. The public began to panic, and the first major bank run hit Ponzi's office. When an angry mob of 2,000 investors rushed his office demanding their money back, Ponzi didn't run or lock the doors. He executed a masterclass in psychological manipulation. He stepped out onto the street, ordered hot coffee and donuts for the waiting crowd, and calmly assured them that his company was completely solvent. He instructed his clerks to pay out every single person who wanted their principal back, down to the last penny. He handed back over $2 million in cash in a matter of days. Seeing Ponzi pay out millions without blinking completely restored the crowd's faith. Most people stopped their withdrawals, and thousands of new investors actually jumped into line to hand him even more money. Ponzi had temporarily defeated a bank run through pure theatrical confidence. The end arrived in August 1920. The U.S. District Attorney ordered an official audit of Ponzi's books, led by a sharp public auditor named Edwin Pride. At the same time, Ponzi's own publicist, William McMasters, realized the company was a fraud and went directly to the Boston Post. On August 11th, the audit results hit the headlines. The numbers were catastrophic. Charles Ponzi was hopelessly insolvent. He owed over $7 million to investors, but his actual liquid assets totaled less than $4 million. The state froze his accounts and closed his doors forever. 5 local banks collapsed in the aftermath, dragging thousands of working-class families into complete financial ruin. People lost their homes, their life savings, and their businesses overnight. Charles Ponzi was arrested, convicted of mail fraud, and sentenced to federal prison. After serving his time, he tried to run another land scam in Florida before being deported back to Italy. He eventually died penniless in a charity hospital in Rio de Janeiro in 1949. Ponzi didn't invent the concept of paying old investors with new money, but the sheer scale and speed of his 90-day Boston craze permanently attached his name to the crime, the Ponzi scheme. From Bernie Madoff's $64 billion fraud in 2008 to modern cryptocurrency scams, the core mechanism remains completely unchanged. Charles Ponzi proved a timeless law of human psychology. When people are promised fast, risk-free wealth, greed will systematically override common sense every single time. The next time someone offers you guaranteed, high-return profits with zero risk, remember Boston in 1920. Charles Ponzi died broken, but his blueprint lives on. The scheme changes, the technology updates, but human greed never gets old. For more interesting videos, subscribe to our channel. Also, share your thoughts in comment section.